we've got Luke Crouch here. He's on my right. I don't know where he's at for everybody else, if it's the same organizational structure there. But Luke is a senior staff security engineer for Mozilla. What do you do at Mozilla, Luke? Like, what does the senior staff security engineer do?
Yeah, so I make software. So it's primarily building software. And then the software that we make is in the privacy and security space of Mozilla. So the stuff that I have worked on in the past on the browser side for Firefox was private browsing, tracking protection, our containers. If you use Firefox containers, worked a lot on that. And then we also sort of outside of the browser, we have Firefox Monitor, which is a breach monitoring service powered. Our underlying sort of breach engine or vendor or power is Have I Been Pwned. So we work with Troy to power that one. And then most recently, also on the team that builds Firefox Relay, which is an email aliasing service. And that same team builds and maintains Mozilla VPN too. So a lot of building of software that is in the sort of especially consumer privacy and security space.
Definitely cool. Yeah. Luke and I, if you've seen us together, we often end up on different sides of privacy debates, discussing the ins and outs of various issues. So hopefully maybe some of those will come up today. Ray Davidson is the program manager for the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. So I got to ask first, Ray, I was trying to figure this out because I know we've got a few folks, I think, from Michigan here in the audience or in the attendee list. Is it, if you're from Michigan, are you Michiganders or Michiganites or Michiganians? Like, how do you identify yourself? Oh, you're muted now. There you go.
I was mic muted. Mic muted.
Muted.
I had to learn this because I'm from Georgia.
Okay.
And Georgians are, just add the N. It's easy.
Yeah. Oklahomans, same thing.
Yeah, right. But Michigan. Apparently, it is Michiganders.
Michiganders. I would not have got that.
And that is not gender specific. So there are no Michigese. It's just Michigan.
Awesome. So tell us about, just briefly, the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps, because I love what you're doing up there, and I'm guessing a few people know about it and probably a lot don't. What is that? So what you can, if you want to follow up on this, you could go to everything official in Michigan starts with MI, and we call it my something. Oh, okay.
So the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps' acronym is the MyC3. And you can go on the web to micybercorps.org. And that's CYBERCORPS.org. No E. Cybercorps that's out of scope for us. So the Michigan micybercorps.org is our website. We are, I just was going to go into the Monty Python. We are a group of, never mind. We're a group of information security professionals in the state of Michigan that have volunteered to assist the state in the event of a cyber emergency. And what that definition has evolved since the first idea of this in 2011. The first mention of it I found on a YouTube video in 2013. So it's an old idea. It took a while to take hold, and I think I lost my video. But
we can see you.
All right, good. My apologies. So we have a group of about 50 people that operate as volunteers. We have legislation that supports what we do. You have to have a minimum technical expertise to be on the team. So we look for a couple of years of experience and some certification, and we're kind of flexible on the certifications, but basically sort of Security Plus or better. CISSP, it's the universal entry point. Sorry. But we do require ongoing participation. We have training that we provide, and we require ongoing participation in that training. We have in the past run SANS trainings and funded certifications. That was pre-COVID, and I just can't predict how things are going to go with post-COVID. Sure. But nevertheless, we are very far along. Like I said, we have legislation that's been amended even, and our program is going to be talked about at the National Governors Association's Summit on Cybersecurity in Columbus, Ohio in June. And the Michigan program is going to be talked about as well as Ohio, Wisconsin. And Wisconsin has a very well-developed program. They have more members than we do. They have a lower bar for participation. They help more people. They actually do some ransomware stuff. And I had a long conversation with my counterpart there. So the message is there's at least one other state that has a fairly mature program. The National Governors Association is going to expose a lot of governor and governor-type people. And if you work in a corporate environment, think of it like the vice president goes to a conference and they pick the magazine up from the seat back in front of them and they learn about the new, or they see the ad in the airport. We need this, we need Palo Alto, we need blah, blah, blah. They're going to come home and they're going to need information security professionals or hackers like us to staff this kind of thing. And it was a challenge when our program was first getting started, getting hooked into the sort of the hacker community. So this is my thing this year is to go out and prepare, because you need sort of top down and bottom up. Yep. And I don't really want to pursue that analogy too much, but basically I'm going to go out and talk to one layer, and I need to talk to all of us bottom feeders, and so to speak, and get us all ready for the call. So that's what I'm doing this year, and I will happily take questions. You can send an email to micybercore@michigan.gov, and we'll answer. You can go to the website. You can try and sign up as a member. If you're not Michigan, we won't take you. Please don't hack the website. Look, we're a state agency. I'm not going to vouch for anything. It's due diligence. We do our best with documentation. We're moving into the state enterprise environment. We are in it, actually, and we use the state's ID. But anyway, just be nice, okay?
Well, I know Oklahoma recently created is in the process of creating the OKC3, doing the same thing here. And that's I know there's from the administrative side, they're kind of doing from the top down. Hopefully, we're trying to get some stuff going from the bottom up as well. So we're 10 or 11 years behind you, but hopefully we'll see the same start to spin up in other states. So that's exciting. So let's jump in. Again, if this is your first time joining us, what we do is we just throw out topics and articles and things that are going on in the security world and then rant about it. So there really aren't any other rules other than, I don't know. I really don't have any rules. Have a good time. I'll throw it out, I guess, to start to either one of you. Was there an article or a topic that you guys specifically like, hey, I definitely want to make sure we talk about this one? Or do you want me to just start from the top?
The one that I saw about Clearview, which I think is at the top.
Okay.
Mostly just because it seems to have come up on a couple of other podcasts. Not this particular thing, but they seem to have had a month-long story going on right now.
Yeah, there's a lot. I've seen their name repeatedly. Do you want to summarize kind of what was going on there?
Yeah, so I think Clearview, the article, I guess, originally Slashdot, but then also Business Wire.
Yeah, I love Slashdot. I'm old school.
Yeah. Fun fact, I actually worked at Slashdot.
Did you really? That's awesome.
Yeah, it was part of OSTG, which owned SourceForge.net and Slashdot and ThinkGeek and stuff like that. So I worked there for 400 years.
Nice.
But yeah, so I guess the title, Clearview AI launches Clearview Consent, company's first consent-based product for commercial uses. And I think it was, says for the first time, their industry-leading RFT algorithm will be available for a multitude of identity verification purposes across the commercial marketplace. Yeah, I remember hearing about, if you all ever listen to CyberWire, probably CyberWire podcasts, I assume maybe popular in this crowd. The one that I like the best is Caveat, and they had a talk. They had back in, I want to say just May 12th, so not too long ago. Like I said, they had talked about how the ACLU settled a case against Clearview AI, and part of the settlement was that they will no longer sell. Let's see, ACL filed suit, so stop Clearview AI selling this facial recognition data. Result of the settlement, they'll no longer be selling its data to private entities, which is like, that's odd. And the nuance here, I think, is that what this consent thing is that they're selling is actually not the data. It is the facial recognition algorithm.
Right.
So even in the Cyberwire podcast, when they talked about that, they talked about how, is this going to affect Clearview's bottom line in a big way, that they won't be able to sell to private entities? And I think their overall take on it was like, probably not. Like, they're going to still be able to sell data to public and like government agencies, which is sort of most of their business. So this was kind of always a smaller part of their business. And then in the settlement, it specifically said the data, not, we won't provide any services at all to any private companies. It was very much like, we won't sell this data to private companies. Right.
Right.
So to me, this just feels like, yeah, I mean, if you heard about the Clearview AI ACLU settlement before, you probably expected like, okay, they used their language very carefully there.
That's exactly what I thought too. Yeah. I thought it. So here's a question. With the facial recognition technology, the FRT stuff, like there was what was the Amazon one? Recognition? Is that what it was called a couple years ago? Back like 2019, 2020, Amazon came out and said, hey, we're not going to sell this to law enforcement or the government. Like, we've decided that's too dangerous. And so we're just going to stop pursuing that as a business model. They very carefully did not say we're going to stop the research and development or that we're not going to sell it anywhere else. They just said we're going to stop, basically selling to law enforcement. Clearview did not go that route. They basically just said, hey, it's going to happen anyway. What do you guys think? Like, to me, I feel like facial recognition is inevitable and that we're going to continue to see more uses like this. Am I wrong?
Yeah, probably like most things. I think this is usually the thing we dance around a lot, Nathan, you and I, is like the technology itself is there. I mean, it's not like you're going to take the technology and, unlearn it, like right. Undiscover the technology from the world.
But you can. I mean, like massive global destruction, right? If you wipe out the civilization, the tech goes away. We've seen that in the past, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different sort of, when they say nuke from high orbit, that's not what they're talking about.
I mean, we did that to the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas, right? Like, it's possible. Right. It is an option. Maybe not the best option.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think you're right. There's no putting the technical genie back in the bottle. There was actually another of the same podcast episode from, I think maybe it was this week's. It was the one from, the 19th. So last week's Caveat that talked about, what are they calling this? FANFSA, FANFSA Act. The Freedom or the Fourth Amendment Not for Sale Act.
Right.
Which is especially aimed at, there's this kind of like legal loophole in the sense that government agencies, while they can't just subpoena or grab this data out of the public, they can buy it. So even they can't necessarily get your, all of the pictures of you that have been taken on cell phones on a certain carrier's provider. They can't just go force the carrier to give them that data, but
if it's for sale,
there's a loophole where they could buy it, and that doesn't. And so there's this FANFSA Act, which is essentially aimed at closing the loophole. And I think that kind of points at my take on a lot of this stuff is like the number of technical solutions to like you said, the technology here. The number of technical solutions are limited in their effectiveness or in their reach or in their, like, how many people can actually adopt them, right? How many people want to walk around with literally like face masks on their face all day in order to defeat this? Like, so at some point, it does have to go up to a legal level.
Yeah. I'm skeptical of like that particular law in general, and just the ability to limit the government or law enforcement from doing those things. Because to me, what seems the obvious response is, okay, if we're not allowed to do that, we can hire contractors that provide us certain information, and we don't stipulate how they get the information, but the law doesn't prevent them from buying it. You know what I mean? Like there's so many. Uh-oh, we lost Ray. There he's back. Oh, there's so many ways to jump around with stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what cutouts are. It's called a cutout, right? You find some third party to take care of the dirty business for you. And it's like nuclear weapons were going to be used. You know, if we're lucky, they don't get used again. But somebody's got to go over the line. Somebody's going to go over the line with stuff. So it's like there are people calling for more regulation of lots of things these days. And all of those things are already existent in society, and everybody is resistant to having something taken away, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So nobody's going to go for that.
Well, you all may know more about this particular angle on the contracting part of it. So, because like I said, I'm in more of the software building in the privacy security space. I wouldn't call myself like a InfoSec professional, or certainly not red team or blue team kind of thing. But I do read a lot about contractors for government agencies having to comply with certain security requirements, bare minimums and stuff. So even if you're a contractor for the government, it seems like you're also subject to certain regulations and compliance. So I don't know, like I said, just me hearing about that, I don't know if that actually carries over to this sort of case where okay, well, it's, some other government, it's Department of Defense, it's FBI or whatever, but if they have a contractor that's working for them, are they subject to these same sorts of, regulations? You all might know more about that than I do.
I would say any good InfoSec answer, the answer is it depends. Right? And that's, I mean, always. The InfoSec and law, right? Both sides are going to say it depends. And so when you combine the two issues, that's what you get. No, here's the difference between contractual compliance requirements, think PCI. It's very specific, and if you don't uphold your end, you get fined or sued, right? So that's what you tend to see. On the government side, when you see compliance and regulation, what you tend to have is much more generalized statements with if you don't do good enough, we're going to fine you or sue you. And so on one side, on PCI, you have the let's bicker about this specific point and are we meeting this or not, and exactly how are we implementing this. On the other side, with HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA, NERC-CIP, whatever, it's more, are we doing good enough so that we don't lose our neck, if something bad happens, right? It's we have to make sure that we're at least not being negligent and that we're doing basically what everybody else is doing, but we don't have to go beyond that, because if it comes to court and we say, look, here, this is the norm, we're off, right? And so there's a weird balance there. With government stuff. Is that your experience, Ray? Is that fair?
I'm just thinking of the classic example of that. You just have to be doing as well as everybody else. Was the McDonald's case, where the woman had third-degree burns because she spilled coffee in her lap.
Yep. And
so everybody said, this is terrible. They wanted to sue, and the store approved, or I guess, I forget what the deal was. They went back and they proved that actually that store was keeping their coffee hotter because you had to throw it out if it had been at certain temperature for so long or something like that. And they were trying to save money, basically. Yeah. But everybody thought, oh, you're so stupid. You spill coffee in your lap. What are you doing? But there was a real thing that people were outside the norm. So, yeah, you're right. We are heavily incented to stay in that lane, do enough, but not too much.
Yep. Yeah. I guess maybe to take it back to that one, it's sort of the norms and changing norms, probably to your point, Nathan, which is the norms and changing norms are coming up that, facial recognition is becoming more and more of a thing. Like, these norms are going to have to are being established and understood right now. And I think there's always wiggle room. Like I mentioned to you, I think is like, I'm not a, zero leaks privacy person, or not like a, unreasonable zealot on everything should always be private. But definitely more, I'm a sort of, let's pull it back from no rules, Wild West, and at least put some reasonable controls. Not that you have to, lock everything down, but also like, don't just leave everything completely open.
Yeah. I think that's there's an interesting, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but there's an interesting discussion there about, do you give the government more control and hope they regulate it, or do you keep the government out of it and let know what I mean? It's like which noose do you want around your neck is basically kind of what we're doing. Let's jump to another article here. Ray, was there one specifically that you wanted to cover?
I wanted to I can't get back into Trello.
Oh, the VBIR?
The DBIR, yeah. Let me see if I can find my notes from here. I thought, that's the canonical reference for all of us in this business. Everybody has to read the DBIR, right? So I thought it might be interesting to look at it, and I put the notes in the Atlassian board, so I can't get to them. But as I recall, we had a 13% increase in the last year, which was more in ransomware in the past year, which is more than the past 5 years combined. And I know that when I spoke to my counterpart in Wisconsin, I was very interested to hear that they have actually dealt with some ransomware cases. And for a volunteer organization, that's something that we haven't done much with.
Really?
I'm certainly a little nervous to do any ransomware negotiations, and I do not know whether the Wisconsin Volunteer Organization has done any of that. But they work through the National Guard, and so they have different authorities and possibilities than we do. But I believe that ransomware. I mean, look, Costa Rica's down, right, from ransomware. I've got a local community college that has been ransomware. They're down for the rest of the year. Another regional community college is down from ransomware. I just think this is going to be a big deal. And socially, it's going to be a problem. So, which is another reason for you to volunteer to help your statewide cybersecurity volunteer organization.
Yeah, one of the things
people also.
Right. Well, one of the things that I have found, I don't know if it's interesting, I guess, but maybe surprising, is that more and more of the companies that I've dealt with that are dealing with ransomware, the company itself doesn't have as much input into it as their insurance company. Right. So it tends to be, IT is basically saying, okay, let's let legal, communications, and insurance decide what's going to happen. And, the IT folks tend to have some feedback, and here's what we're capable of doing. Here's what we're able to, what this looks like. If we do that, here's, so they have some input into it. But often security, there's not a lot you could do. I mean, right. Other than being at the table, it tends to be do we pay or not? Do we participate with law enforcement or not?
Well, yeah. If there's a question of whether you share information, sure. Mm-hmm. But there again, that's another big issue. Yeah. Information sharing, because if we're not sharing information, we can't get any better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We've got a really large client that, one of the issues that came up for them was they were in the middle of some stuff, I think with the SEC already. And in the middle of an incident or a potential incident, if they dealt with law enforcement, more information about their internal going-ons would be discoverable and potentially impact the legal implications over on the SEC side. And so they had to walk this tightrope of how do we participate in the investigation, as opposed to, let's just pay the ransom and move on and not even involve law enforcement. Like there's those types of conversations can get really complicated, I think.
Yeah, and it makes you wish for the days when a bit flip was, what you were looking for.
Right. Yeah. The cosmic rays from space.
Yeah, or it was Jewish space lasers.
There you go. Yeah, right.
The cosmic ray Davidsons from space.
The cosmic ray Davidsons. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Here I am on a ray. Yeah.
Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The cosmic rays.
Oh yeah, that was. I remember reading a hilarious couple of articles about those causing issues. We actually had, I think, at Mozilla, we wrote. On like a blog.mozilla.org or maybe hacks.mozilla.org.
Okay.
We wrote like somebody in our data pipeline team, because that's, I think, where they deal with the most literal bits of stuff at Mozilla. And they actually put in like, oh yeah, here's how, like, I think we discovered a bit flip problem and here's how we have a thing to mitigate it or whatever.
It's so weird. Yeah. My favorite example, if you've never heard of this, if you're watching, is it protons? I don't know. There's random like atoms basically that are just like fly through things, and there's the space is filled with this background radiation, and some of it hits Earth. I'm like, if I remember correctly, like if you're on the planet Earth, you get hit by these rays like 8 times per minute or something. There's something, but it's harmless. Like it doesn't do anything. But if it happens to hit a certain bit of RAM at just the right time where it's in the process of changing, it will go the other way, or maybe it's it's random. So. Anyway, yeah, there's some great reading out there. Was that what was leveraged for the Rowhammer attack? Rowhammer is a similar type of thing, but no, not with the cosmic rays. You can't control it. It's just a
yes,
yeah. Right. But Rowhammer was a similar type of. We can use external sources to impact RAM and do something like that. I don't remember the details. Yeah, this technology gets weird.
I find that stuff, I guess a little depressing. Because we think about ransomware, and you looked at the DBIR says like 60 or 80% of things are based on, 80% of breaches are people related. Credentials, mistakes, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And here we are. We're trying to take care of the technical stuff, and
what do you do about the other?
I don't want to go down that road either. We don't need to make fun of users, but it's a big problem.
Yep.
We let the enemy, and he's us.
on the DBIR thing, like I said, since I'm on the securities, like software building side, I think like my closest investigations of the DBIR was mostly around like what we saw with Firefox Monitor, and like trying to understand like, okay, so we see all these breaches going through Firefox Monitor. How did these things happen? Right. So that instead of just alerting people about breaches, can we contribute to actually like preventing breaches? Right. So I've definitely agree with you all. Like this is one of my favorite things when it comes out to look into. And yeah, to look at the ways that it has like changed. And Ray, I stole your notes, or I'm looking at your notes, but yeah, it was the 82% of breaches involved a human element, which is still like phishing and credentials. So that's one of the things that you focus on a lot in Firefox Monitor, is to tell people. And I know that, in these sorts of situations and scenarios, it's usually someone who owns the database had their credentials stolen, not necessarily our Firefox Monitor users are stolen. But that's definitely like a key thing that we put out there and all that stuff. And it's one of the things I think at Mozilla we try to sort of remind ourselves a lot about, which is there was a great Mozilla contributor blog post years back, and I think the name of his blog was something like nottheusersfault.com or something. And he was, it was essentially like he was trying to say like, look, you can try and make fun of technology users, but we're the technologists. We built this, right? Yeah. So like it's on us. We're the ones who understand both the technology, and now we can see how people are using it. Like this is our responsibility, right? You don't just throw them out there and hey, people misuse it or whatever. You're like, well, you can do stuff about that.
Have you seen the TikTok video of the woman, like she's the developer and she's watching the QA person with the little children's toy with the shapes, and it's like, ooh, there's a square, where does it go? And it's in the square. Here's a circle, where does it go? That's right, in the square. Here's a semicircle, where does it go? that's right, in the square. And like this developer space is just like, no. And then eventually it's just resigned defeat, right? Like, but yeah, I mean, if we build the systems, users are going to use them the way.
Nice.
Yeah. One thing about the DBIR that is important to keep in mind is it's based on the data of Verizon's incident response team. And so that is a limited subset. I know from other sources, the percentage increase in ransomware is actually significantly higher if you include all of the other, all organizations, which, I mean, bad is bad, right? It's just...
Even badder.
Yeah, badder, right. The DBIR tends to heavily lean on credit card breaches because of that contractual compliance we talked about earlier. If you are a PCI merchant and you're compromised, you have to utilize one of a small number of qualified incident response teams, and Verizon is one of the biggest ones. So that skews their numbers a little bit. But I know, Ray, you mentioned there are 4 key paths to exploit that they listed.
Yep.
Do you remember what those were? I'm scrolling here.
It was credentials, phishing, credential misuse, vulnerabilities. So you do have to stay patched.
Yep.
And botnets.
Right. Yeah. So I think those 4 things are still relevant regardless of, those are the 4 primary ways that people are getting compromised.
Yeah.
But if you think about,
oh, go ahead, Ray. Yeah.
I'm thinking about, so how do we deal with these? How do we prevent these? Phishing and credentials is, there's a lot of awareness. That's the human stuff. Yep. The exploiting vulnerabilities. I always try to go back to simple stuff like the CIS controls, hardware and software vulnerabilities and a vulnerability management program. That's what you need for that exploiting vulnerabilities. But the phishing and credentials, man, if you don't do that every month, I used to work for SANS. I remember when the president of SANS got hooked by the fish, and he sent around the email and said, "Hey guys, I got caught.
Yep.
Be careful. I'm a smart guy, and somebody's always going to get caught by that. So we have to have. I saw a great talk by Ira Winkler at the B-Sides Fort Wayne last Saturday, where he was talking about he's the CISO at Walmart, yes, and he was talking about the correlations between safety engineering and cyber security engineering, and there's just a whole lot of overlap. If you think about the number of users that you have in your company, what's the percentage of psychopaths in the general population? Do you think you're going to weed out all of them if you have a large? I mean, this is not really. Statistics, man.
Yeah.
A company the size of Netflix, I'm not throwing anything, but a large company, you're going to have somebody that's a little weird. So you better have most defense in depth against a person that's inside your network. So you need to be modeling that also. And please hire me.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you all on like the phishing and credentials. I know when I started doing breach-related stuff, Firefox Monitor stuff, and password manager stuff in Firefox, we obviously like dealing a lot with sort of credentials and how they get stolen and abused and all that other kind of stuff. But one of the questions I have is like, I remember being very excited about things like WebAuthn, FIDO, U2F, and things that could move sort of authentication and authorization out of, and 2FA, obviously, at least moving it out of a credentials only scheme. So 2FA gives you credentials plus something else.
Right.
And like, I think that's still like the number one piece of advice that I give at the consumer security level, right, is 2FA on your accounts. That kind of stuff is, I think, still one of the most popular, common, effective pieces of advice. And I have this sort of, from the consumer experience standpoint, I think that a piece of hardware that authenticates you is maybe the only other mental model that is as popular as a password, in the sense that people are usually used to like a physical key doing something
Right.
like at a house, at a padlock, at a car. Like people are used to like, oh, I have this one physical thing that I physically possess and own that unlocks things for me. And so I don't know if that's still like from more of the infosec side of things. Like if you're going into an enterprise and you're giving them like, hey, here's what you need to be doing. Like when you talk to people about like or making their authentication resistant to phishing and credentials, is that still one of the biggest things that you tell enterprises as well?
I would say it depends on the situation. Everything always starts with a depends.
It always depends.
As it's coming out of my mouth, I realize what I'm saying. No, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of training that goes along with protecting meatware, right? The users there's a lot of training required to teach them, one, to be suspicious that they are under attack, what threats look like, how to identify things. Here's what, how authentication should work. And it's hard because technology is always changing and users don't keep up with that, right? And so, like several of the protocols and stuff that you mentioned there, like there's really neat stuff happening there, but I don't know that there's a consistent, like, here is the solution for everyone. I'm a big fan of the get away from passwords eventually. I'm not a big fan of the jump both feet into something brand new that isn't proven yet, but there's a balance there somewhere, right? Like somebody's got to take that risk. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's like we were saying before, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Evolution does it. You maybe delay it, but it's going to happen. And it's always, we all know that security and facility or ease of use are always in conflict. Yep. I love my iPhone because it looks at my face. I can just hold it up near the gas pump and magic things happen. Is that, I worry about the security because I'm a security professional, but I figure, I'm running faster than the other guys. So maybe I'll be all right. But it's happening.
I was gonna say, man, when was this? This was a year or two ago. A friend of mine, some of his coworkers were doing some reverse engineering with different products, and they were looking into the Windows biometric support and the whole authentication stuff in Windows, and they were able to enumerate the list of biometrics that Windows has support for. Now, it's not necessarily that it's built in and that it's working, but there's a stub in the code where somebody thought through, here is something that we could use for authentication. And I've got a list here. Some of them are obvious, like voice and fingerprint and iris and retina, but you have hand geometry, you have lip movement, thermal face image, your gait, your scent, your ear shape. I mean, I'm curious what the technology looks like when we can authenticate somebody via scent. Sorry, I haven't showered today, so I can't log into my computer.
I love that scent made it, and how many people's hygiene practices are going to change, and before their Zoom calls, whenever scent becomes a thing that gets transmitted over your your online video calls.
Technology does not need to go that far.
No, I think, back on the point, I think just like real quickly on the like security and usability, one of the other sort of Firefox or Mozilla design sort of leads, I think drove home to me is that like security without usability is not security because people won't use it. And so they're not being secure. So it's like a big part. And that's a thing that we constantly wrestle with is we have certain ways that we could build something that would be maximum privacy, right? And it would be unusable or it'd be so inconvenient that's like no one's going to use it. So we are constantly having to figure out where is the right to thread the needle there.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, part of living together in a society is recognition that for some people that needle is in different places. How do we balance that ability to say, you know what, you're cool with this type of needle, but I need this other type of needle. And so I may be taking that analogy too far, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're trying to have a diverse society that takes into account different people's abilities and needs.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
I don't think
that's absurd.
Yes, totally.
It's a tapestry. It's a tapestry, Nathan. We're sticking with the needle analogy, the thread, the needle, tapestry, mosaics,
I've often said, people tell me every once in a while, hey, you should run for president, right? You think you know everything and you can fix it. I've often said I would make a horrible president, but I would make a fantastic benevolent dictator. Like, put me in charge of everything, give me total control. I'll fix it. I can fix all the problems. Yeah.
Fix all the things.
Fix all the things. All right, let's move on here. So there was a deal about Twitter. I just wanted to briefly touch on because I thought it was interesting. The Twitter privacy settlement. So basically in 2011, I think it was 2011, there was an agreement with regulators about how Twitter would use certain data from users. Speaking of MFA, right? People provide their, I think it was cell phone numbers and email addresses and stuff like that. Well, then it came out that Twitter was actually using that to, if I remember correctly, Twitter was using that as a way to allow advertisers to target certain types of users, which I may be okay with. I don't know, right? Like if your phone number starts with 918, it makes sense that you likely live in the Tulsa area. So let's target ads based on Tulsa to you. But then I guess there was some problem or some in the technology, supposedly inadvertently, those advertisers were actually able to get the phone numbers and email addresses and all that, not just target with them.
Bad dog.
Yeah. So I struggle with this. Like, do you guys remember? Did you guys watch Mark Zuckerberg when he was before Congress and answered all the you watched some of it?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
the Cliff Notes.
Yeah. I don't know. I was bored or something. I watched it all, but one of the things that he kept coming up with was, we've done tons of studies and people like targeted ads better than they like untargeted ads. Everybody says I feel awkward about it, but they still like it more than just random, why in the world did I get this pregnancy related thing? I'm a 72-year-old guy. This makes no sense. So I don't know. What do you think about this situation? Like, is Twitter completely out of order?
No, I'd echo that. We've done even Mozilla Firefox, we've recruited research in the privacy space and asked people about targeted ads, and we find the same thing. Like, people are like, I definitely like ads that are more relevant to me, right? Yeah. So I think that's a universal thing, and I would say the same thing even as a privacy person. What we try to do is there shouldn't be an either or here. Like, there's a way to have privacy and relevant ads. Like, we don't pretend that we have the silver bullet solution for it. Like, I don't believe it's for it. But I also don't believe in the false dichotomy that it's an either or. Like, you could have both. This particular one with Twitter doing it, I don't know. Like, the article seemed to say that, I don't know if, like you said, the advertisers with whom data was shared were able to figure out all of the plain phone numbers. Or if Twitter straight up said, here's a list of 150 million people's phone numbers, right? Like,
yeah, I'm trying to find one of the executives in the company said, I can't find it. Where, anyway,
may have inadvertently been used for advertising.
Twitter's chief privacy officer said they may have inadvertently been used for advertising. So I guess I feel like I had read something else that implied that it was a technical mistake. But it also may have been a situation where the folks selling the advertising had access to that data and didn't realize, or didn't, maybe they weren't properly trained that, I shouldn't just email to this advertiser that asked for it.
Yeah, I think we see that. Like I said, the latest thing I've been working on is Firefox Relay, which gives you alias email addresses. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we built it is because if you go to Twitter, Facebook, and something like that, you can upload your customer list if you want to. Like, hey, I've got a number of existing customers, and I want to be able to show my ads specifically to them when they're on Twitter and Facebook. Right? It's like, well, you've got a relationship with those customers. They've already given you an email address, their phone number. Like, they trust you enough with that, right? Even the way that those targeting mechanisms work on Facebook and Twitter is you upload a list of hashes, not the plain text, right? So they have they can do that by a hash without you having to share plain text with each other, right? So I think that's at least a step towards. Maybe we shouldn't just be sending around CSV files with 150 million people's phone numbers in them.
Yeah.
In plain text over the internet. So like they're taking some steps, but at the same time, like the one that bothered me about this is specifically these were collected for 2FA. Like these were literally collected for security.
Yeah. It's clearly a GDPR violation, right? Like it was collected for one thing and used for another.
GDPR though, didn't it?
Oh, you're right. So it may,
I think this was like a
good point.
A fine for an old, it violated a 2011 agreement.
Yeah.
And it at least until at least September 2019. So that would have been right around that time.
It's an elegant weapon from another time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I put the relevant quote in the chat. If you're telling people this is just what Luke said, if you're getting their phone numbers for one purpose and using it for something else, then you're deceiving them. And that's naughty. And that's what the FTC is for, is to spank you. Yeah. But again, it's like you don't put the genie back in the bottle. So you get a year's credit monitoring. You know, how many overlapping years do we all have?
Right. All right. So there was another article about DuckDuckGo. This came out that DuckDuckGo is not as private. The privacy browser that protects you from all the bad stuff is actually letting Microsoft track you because Microsoft pays them for it. Luke,
shocked.
Luke, I don't know if you can talk about this or if this is outside. Like Mozilla has dealt with this kind of stuff, right?
It's outside of my scope. I definitely have to stay safe and say as little as possible. But I think probably the main thing that I'll say is that building online privacy products today is very hard.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's so hard. I can so relate with and empathize with like the struggles of having to do things both ways.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to get Luke in trouble. I know I've looked at it in the past and had conversations with people. At least at one point, a significant portion of Mozilla's funding came from that search. Whenever you open the browser for the first time or you type in a search term, wherever that takes you to, that was paid for. And I'm assuming that DuckDuckGo is in the same boat. I think that's a lot of the privacy tools and stuff that Luke talks about is, my guess is trying to figure out how do we fund this in a different way other than using, Microsoft or Google or Yahoo. I don't know if Yahoo's still around. But yeah, I don't know. Is there any, I've had so many people that were almost militant about DuckDuckGo being so safe. And I don't know. It is what it is.
I think that the lesson there is just be careful what you're militant about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think I'm a little safer ground, again, just like continuing to empathize with the situation rather than, talk about, Monday morning quarterbacking any particular company's thing. But like, I like it when we have sort of Mozilla community contributors that are even bigger and better and stronger and stricter privacy advocates than I am, that come at me and hold me accountable for a way that I built something like one of our browser add-ons or something like that. Like, to me, that is a healthy check on us. Like, they keep us in check, they keep us honest, they keep us accountable to our own principles and values that we put out for ourselves. So I think it's a good amount of maybe like you're saying, Ray, like, don't be overly militant about any particular thing. Definitely hold your favorite privacy vendors and products to account for the things, for their own high values that they talk about. I think that's good. But yeah, it's like I said, this stuff is really, really hard to do in the best of all possible ways that you can figure out. And then sometimes, challenges come up, your community takes you to task for it. We figure it out. In the best cases, what we do is we use that as a very strong learning opportunity for ourselves and be like, okay, like, there's definitely something here that we need to figure out and do better at.
Right.
It's information sharing, right? It's same thing. Right? We should note, since this is going on YouTube, that Luke he was very gracious and did not say nana boo boo at any point in his in his commentary. Thank you, Luke, for keeping civic behavior going.
I did tell him before we got started, I normally use Chrome for everything because I'm fairly built into the Google ecosystem with all the things. Yeah. But I was having problems with Chrome and delays and video and whatnot. So I'm actually running Firefox for this. And I didn't do it just for him, but it seemed relevant and great. So moving on, last thing here, I think this will probably be our last article. The digital driver's license in Australia. I thought this was an interesting article. I've had lots of conversations and I've dug into some of the digital ID stuff, digital driver's license and all that kind of stuff. Some of the stuff that's happening here in the States. Does Michigan have one yet? I feel like no, they don't. Okay, yet. It might be. Well,
we don't have Minnesota. We don't have the agreement with Apple anyway.
Okay, so there are several states that are working with either IDEMIA or other organizations to build out a digital ID. And I think Apple and Google with Android are building some of the functionality into like the Google Wallet and the Apple Wallet and stuff like that. In fact, the latest version of Google Wallet that just came out mirrors some of the functionality in Apple Wallet. But I thought this was interesting. So this article is basically everybody saying, hey, these driver's licenses are hard to fake. And guess what? It took us 4 minutes to fake it or forge it or whatever. What are your thoughts? Like, is the idea of a digital driver's license, digital ID, is that a pipe dream? Is that just like problematic from the beginning or not? You're muted, Ray. There you go.
There I go. Okay. So I thought this was really interesting because when they reported the vulnerability to the government said if law enforcement stops you and they use the QR code will check the back-end database and the law enforcement officer will get the correct information. So anyway, there is no vulnerability. The only vulnerability is that kids it's got a 4-digit password, so it's easy to, or 4-digit PIN.
Brute force, yeah.
Yeah, so you can brute force it, and there's a YouTube video, and so kids can get into bars underage. And what's the drinking age in Australia? And they have fosters anyway. So, what's the big deal here?
What's the point? Yeah. Well, that is an interesting perspective because, what we're saying is that the client-side technology is vulnerable to abuse by whoever controls it. But that's kind of the same thing with driver's licenses, right?
Yeah. But I think the complaint was, and in fact, the point of the article was that if you use the driver's license to be a reliable indicator of age by relying on what's printed on it, then you're using it for the wrong thing. It's like using Social Security number for ID. Right. It's out there and you can leverage that. But if you start to pay, or I remember when the Apple Macintosh, I see you have a Macintosh back there and maybe you have volumes of Inside Macintosh. But I remember in the early days, Apple used to break shit all the time because developers would take advantage of undocumented features. Right. And then the next version would come out, it would break. So it was just an interesting response because. And it's similar to the security versus ease of use, because here you've got this tool that, let's say, bars have adopted because it's there. And how else are they going to do it? And yet it wasn't really intended for that, maybe. That was the sense I got from the article. So I found it very interesting. And all of these things are going to be, it's tough to do.
Yeah, I think the point about the ease of use, so like as we've been in the relay space and we're dealing with identities and privacy tools around people's identities, and I'm overall very skeptical and hesitant about the Web3 sort of machinations in these spaces. Sure. But the product, in terms of a product like a digital wallet, that appeals to me. Just from I have an iPhone, and the things that I have that I've been able to use or put into like the Apple digital wallet, like tickets to soccer games, airline tickets, like whatever. I'm like, this is kind of cool and convenient. And like at Mozilla, we always try to look for like, what is the way that we can give the people the convenience and the values and the good things that they wanted, right? Like we don't, you can't just say, like we're talking about, you can't just say like, oh, sorry, yeah, you could have convenient tickets, but instead you have privacy and security. Like, no, there should be a way forward to figure out both, right?
Yeah.
So in this particular case, I think I liked that. I like the idea behind the convenience of it. I get why people want this, whether it's like doomed to never be secure. I don't know. There was one piece of it, because I'm coming at it from the privacy side of things, that I thought was fun, which is the name and status. Mm-hmm. So basically, the way that this was implemented was that the QR code transmits only the name and status of someone being under or over 21, which I think is like, I have read, if you haven't seen it, Cloudflare has put out a proposal called Privacy Pass. I don't know if it's still actively developed or not, but it seemed like it was on a good path, that there could be a standard where instead of sort of presenting all of your information, mm-hmm. like name, address, birth date, everything, you can have a sort of entity that can attest to certain claims about yourself, like right. I'm over 21, I'm from Oklahoma, that kind of thing. Those claims can then be attested by some trusted third party, digitally signed, cryptographically signed, and then you can present just that. So you don't right. have to give all of the information about just the necessary claim. And I like that they went and did that, but then of course somebody went and broke it. So
well, I think that's the best argument for digital ID, other than the convenience and the hassle of, I hate carrying around a wallet with my Costco card and my credit card and my concealed carry card, and I can't see what that is.
It's being recorded. Look at all those numbers we can count.
Digital identity card. Yeah, is that for your bank? Is that what it was? You're muted again.
Sorry. You can become a citizen of Estonia. You can apply. It's my digital identity card for Estonia. I don't have a bank account or anything like that, and I'm not entitled to any services. But I could. This would be my identity card to use as an electronic citizen of Estonia. So the question of, can you have a digital ID? Yes, it's possible to do. Because this is. I know somebody lived in Estonia. They have to use these for everything. You can put that on a phone.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So the challenge will be not just can it be done, but, okay, what kind of readers, what kind of technology, what kind of capabilities do you have to push down to everybody that wants to use it, right? If I want my bouncers at my bar to be able to validate ID that way,
right?
What technology do they have to be able to do that? And you're always going to have kids that try to forge it. Like that's going to happen.
And the advantage of the card is it doesn't need a battery. The iPhone, if think about when you get to board the plane and you've been texting in the gate. I'm sure none of you have ever been scared about that, but
I've got several little batteries that I carry around with me. The Anchor batteries or whatever. That's a great way to make friends on a plane, by the way. If you see somebody hunting around trying to plug in their phone, and you'd be like, "Oh, here's a battery, plug it in." It's a great way to make friends.